Thanks, everyone. Right, today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about customer-driven digital transformation. But I'm going to start with some stats, and we've had a few stats today, and who doesn't love a stat during a presentation? So apparently 88% of companies are undergoing some form of digital transformation. So can we have a show of hands in the room as to who's going through this process at the moment? I'm expecting 88%, loads of you. How's it going? You sort of looked happy. I wasn't expecting that. Happy times, happy faces. So amazing, everyone's at it, and it's amazing the amount of briefs that I've seen over the last year or so that have mentioned digital transformation, which sometimes make me a little bit scared, because I don't know what it means, and do you guys either? However, I hate to tell you guys, particularly those of you who are going through this process, it doesn't often work. Forbes tell us that 84% of companies fail at transformation. And when I was doing some research for this talk, I found a lot of similar stories. And obviously, they're failing for different reasons. But, what does failure mean? How do you know whether you've transformed or not? That's a difficult thing to measure and understand, really. I believe the best chance of succeeding during your digital transformation process is on the basis of having a good understanding of your customer. With that, I believe you stand yourself in the best possible chance. So that's really what I'd like to talk to you about today. And I'd like to share a tool or a process that we use quite often at cxpartners, which is the basis then for a digital transformation process. So hopefully you'll go away from this talk with something in your back pocket that you can try tomorrow back at the office. So a little bit about cxpartners. I don't know if you guys are aware of us. We're based in Bristol. I've been here for 12 years, down in the middle of town, around the back of out Bristol. We're an experience design consultancy. But really, what we're all about is understanding people and the way that they live their lives and trying to understand the problems they're trying to solve. So much as Paul brilliantly talked about in the previous talk, where people go to sites and use tools to do specific things. They're not there for fun. We all fall into the trap in believing that everyone loves the companies we work for, they love the products we make, and they wouldn't do anything other than use our products and services in their spare time. There's a problem with that reality is massively different. Typically people don't want to have to do the things that we're providing the products and services to allow them to do. So we're all about understanding people and the way they do things, and the big idea really is to make things that work for people. It doesn't sound like rocket science, but we all know how frustrating it can be to try and use things online. So we're about trying to solve those problems. We're lucky to work with the great and the good, and a lot of these companies are going through some element of transformation, clearly on massively varying scales, but it's not an uncommon thing. So you're in good company. So why the hell did I try and define what digital transformation is? What a silly thing to ask. What a silly thing to try and do. But of course, I think it depends on who you ask. From reading different briefs that are coming from different clients and trying to understand how they see their problems as being something to do with digital transformation. Clearly, this perception of what this thing is vastly different. Sometimes it's on a very, very small scale, but just by the sounds of it, it sounds terrifying, doesn't it? It sounds like a massive thing that's very unsettling and causes lots and lots of problems for people. Obviously, I had to look up a definition, and here's a definition. The thing I liked about this is it does mention the customer. So I'm all about the customer and people and understanding people and designing things to work better for people. But it talks about leveraging the customer. Like, who here in the audience enjoys being levered? How often do you sort of say to your husband or wife when you're just doing a bit of shopping, just being levered on a touch point, I'll be with you in 5 minutes. It's just... This is part of the problem, isn't it? Like the language is nonsense, and much of the work that I do is just trying to simplify things, and that's kind of simplifying everything from the products and services that we use, but also the language we use to try and talk to people about the things they're trying to use. It makes such a difference. So, also, even though this feels like a very recent buzzword, there's nothing new about digital transformation, and it's interesting to think about some kind of stories from way back when. That I think are perfect examples of digital transformation. Think about Encyclopedia Britannica. So, back in the day, people would go around selling volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Has anyone got any of these at home? I think my parents might have had a set, but it was just a thing. I don't know whether it was some kind of status symbol back in the day to be like, whoa, look at my knowledge, look at my stuff. But you can imagine at some point in time, very quickly, they they're in a bit of a pickle because people no longer needed to have spare, 5 meters of shelf space in their homes, because all of a sudden people like Microsoft started helpfully providing in Carter their kind of digital version of the Encyclopedia Britannica for free on a CD-ROM. And with the proliferation of PCs, people had means to access this information, but they could do it with the CD-ROM. So the CD-ROM was the thing that pretty much killed or was a massive threat to the Encyclopedia Britannica. So in this instance, digital transformation was important because they had to try and survive. And this had been around for like 240 years. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, well, surely the internet was the thing that killed the encyclopedia. Surely Wikipedia was the thing, but it was the CD-ROM. And it was actually, it turns out, at the point in time where the CD-ROM became a thing, the kind of penetration of web access was very, very low across the world. But when that started to rise, all of a sudden, Encyclopedia Britannica had a means to get access to people again, that kind of direct relationship through the internet. Previously, their margins had been cannibalized because they were selling through retailers and wholesalers who were taking a cut. So I think for every set of maybe encyclopedias they would sell, they would maybe only make 20%. They'd be giving away margin to all these other people. So when the internet became widely available, all of a sudden people could get direct access. So they still offer a kind of encyclopedia product if you have a look at their website, but they've massively diverged in terms of their product set. They get involved with kind of e-learning tools. So that's given them an amazing platform. So, this is a good example of kind of age-old digital transformation. But another one was, I was thinking back to one of my first jobs was at Leeds University. And we were designing e-learning tools, which at the time was the thing. E-learning solved a massive problem for universities because it enabled them to charge students, say, 500 quid to take an e-learning course, which at the time were all CD-ROM based. So I studied environmental science, which is obviously a perfect grounding for doing the job that I do today. And in year one, we had to do this kind of CD-ROM based learning, which meant you had to spend maybe 50, some ridiculous amount of hours that you'd spend per week just staring at a screen, and then you'd be assessed at the end of it. It was awful. But for the universities, we're loving it because they could charge, for every student, I think they would get 500 quid. So they'd pull in all these students from these other faculties and departments and saying, do a foundation course in environmental science. You'll get your 20 credits or whatever. They get 500 quid a head, but from a customer point of view, from a student point of view, it was a nightmare. It was rubbish. It was boring. You'd have to turn up there. No one ever went. You'd see your mates in a dark room. Everyone's clicking away. You lose all the benefits of a shared experience, a shared learning experience. You can't ask your mates what they thought about this, what they thought about that, what the answer to this thing was. So an interesting example of transformation because it made the university money. From the customer point of view, it was hellish, but we didn't have a choice. So what a great situation. We hated it, So it's nothing new. And I talked earlier about why there's this kind of high failure rate. And sorry, there's loads of bad news there. Bad news, bad news. You can get through this. And I thought, well, why is this going wrong? Why are these things failing? And I came up with a few reasons. I'm astonished by the amount of people that I work with who feel that their companies have a lack of clear strategy and direction. So they go to work every day, but they don't really know what their organization is trying to achieve. They can't just kind of put it in a pithy sentence and summarize that thing. And I don't think that's uncommon. It's a hard thing to do. And I think companies really struggle to articulate that. They kind of know, but they can't explain it, which is why when you see, the kind of about pages on sites, it's baffling. It's very, very hard to articulate those things. There's a brilliant talk that covers this, actually. I don't know, I'm sure some of you guys have seen this. There's been a bit of chat about TED Talks earlier. A chap called Simon Sinek, and I'd recommend watching it, actually. And he's come up with this model to help companies articulate their mission and their values. And it's a really nice, simple thing. And he's saying, really, he studied what he was seeing as being successful communicators and great leaders, and he'd spotted some patterns. And he was saying, the great and inspirational leaders are very, very good at articulating the why behind what they do. So, we all know what we do every day at work. We know how we do it. We might have a differentiator that means we do that thing a bit better than someone else that may be our kind of competitor advantage. But being able to articulate why you do that as a company, why is it that you do that? What's your mission? What's your purpose? Is so powerful because it just allows people to kind of understand your drive and your understanding, and allows customers to kind of join with you. So do watch the video. It's fantastic. It's only a quick watch. I think a lot of companies are just knackered. Everyone's knackered. Everyone's just fed up of going through transformation programs, particularly in the public sector. It seems never ending. There's always restructure. There's always transformation. And people are tired of it. People are sick of being in this kind of period of, or feeling of kind of stasis. You know, we're going through transformation. I don't know when it's going to finish. I don't know what it's going to feel like when it's finishing. I don't really like change because it's unsettling. My job's at risk. All of this stuff is very, very negative and very unsettling. So, you know, people are moving around. So there's a lot of that going on, I think. And links to that, I think, is kind of a cultural inertia, you know. It's really interesting to think how, like typically now, we're being given the design challenge of helping to redesign an organization. So you used to get a lot of briefs, you know, redesign a thing, a website, an experience, a digital, whatever it might be. You know, help us redesign our organization. Wow, what an amazing challenge that is. I mean, where do you start? How do you do that? You know, how do you just change people's mindsets? And, you know, there's all these classic lines, you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you can have a great idea, but how can you actually make it change? How can you make people change? Very, very hard. The other thing I think is transformation is treated like a project. You know, I am working on a transformation project. It will be finished on November the 12th at, you know, midday. Brilliant, we'll be done. We'll crack on with the next project. In reality, like a website, these things are never finished. You know, they're never finished. A company surely has to continually transform to survive and evolve and adapt. So, you know, this kind of short-term thinking doesn't help. So, you know, how can your customers help to shape your transformation, and how can you be successful? Again, through doing a bit of research for the talk, I found a really handy book. I mean, there's a lot of books available, and some are easier to read than others, to be honest. But this was nice, and it was quite pithy. And David Rogers, who wrote this book, he kind of broke down digital transformation into different domains, which made it a little bit easier to understand. When he talks about customers as being one of the kind of main pillars of transformation, he talks about it in terms of kind of harnessing the power of your customers and their networks to kind of help to kind of ensure the success of your transformation, which I think is valid, but I guess I see it slightly differently. It's important to recognize that people have never been more powerful to kind of share success stories or share, you know, really bad stories about their experiences with the products and services that you're providing. So you've got to be really, really careful. And people are very keen to learn from others about what they should do. You know, we saw earlier around, you know, the power of reviews, for example, within e-commerce sites, and how people look to people they associate with, typically through their networks, because we all live in our echo chambers where we ask our friends and, you know, our like-minded peers what we should do, where we should go. Because it makes life easier, doesn't it? You know, it's so much easier for me to ask people I know where I should find a particular thing if I trust them, and they'll help me. So these networks are hugely powerful and hugely influential. So I wanted to put forward just an idea, and it's not a complicated strategy, and I kind of hate the word strategy because it's unnecessarily complicated and it makes things conflated. But how about this for a proposition when you're thinking about your digital transformation? I reckon, you know, if you were to understand, how about you try and understand your customer so you can make things that actually solve the problems in their lives? You know, why would you be doing anything else? You know, why would you do that? But so often it's the other way around. It's like, you know, a company has access to a certain technology. Like, we've got this amazing thing, it can do this cool thing. This is what's going to kind of be the absolute keystone of our success. But the problem is there may never be an actual user need for that thing, so people will never use it. It will never solve a problem in their lives. And we should be making things that solve real problems for real people. Why would we do anything else? How could we hope to succeed without doing that? So this is about thinking about how you should go about making things and providing things to people. And you can kind of buddy up with your customers to help you to run experiments. And an experimental mindset, I think, is one of the most important things to have within modern business, particularly in terms of how you should be creating digital products and services. And if you're trying to transform, traditionally, the way it worked was there would be a requirements phase, which would go on forever, and lots of people would gather lots of requirements from the business, and sometimes, if you're lucky, from customers. And, you know, typically I'd find myself just being given this enormous wodge of stuff from a business analyst or someone, which is just like, basically, this is what we want. Go off and build it. You know, how long do you need? And you go off and you make this thing, and you make a big orange circle, right, hypothetically. however, the way we're working now is quite different. And it's all about this idea of, MVP or minimum viable product. Essentially just trying to invest the smallest amount of time and effort possible to make the first instance of the thing, just to see if it's the actual thing that people want. And then when you start off with a little grey, is it grey? Colour's a bit dodgy here, sorry. You start with a little grey circle, and then you do some learning. You chuck it out into the marketplace, and you put it in front of some people, and you sort of sit back and you watch. And you watch it absolutely fail. But it doesn't matter, because you haven't invested too much time and effort. And obviously this is very important. What is very important is to have an experimental mindset within your company. It's easy for me to say because I work for a design agency and that's the way we think. I know it's not the same within your organizations always. But what that means is you can learn and you can change. And you can change into the orange diamond. And then you learn, oh, it wasn't quite right. And then you kind of evolve and you become this blue star. But the problem with this first approach up here is that, you're giving people the orange, it's conceptual, you're giving people the orange circle. Well, actually, what they always wanted was the blue star. So you have to work in a different way. I just wanted to share a little example, a little story of where this has worked on a real client experience that I had a couple of years ago. So we were working for an organisation called Euroconsumers, who are like Which Magazine. They're like the Which Magazine of Europe. So they help consumers. They're very much the consumer champion, and they'll go and review anything and everything. So if you're thinking of buying a washing machine, a lawnmower, maybe thinking where to go on holiday, I mean, you name it, they've tested it. They'll apply some rigor to that testing, and they'll give it a score. The idea behind the organisation is you pay a membership fee, much as surely you do with Which Magazine. I don't believe they offer a physical magazine, but you go online and you can log in and you get access to all that stuff. So they're absolutely huge. They're massively powerful. Quite often when I'd watch the news and try and understand the news in Belgium, often there'd be representatives of this company on the news talking about how terrible a company was because they just raised their prices or whatever it may be. So they're a big deal. And they're very trusted by within the countries they operate within. But they asked us to help them make a new product. And it was to help them to stop losing customers, because why hypothetically would I pay a subscription to get access to reviews about lawnmowers if I can go anywhere else online and get it for free? So obviously their revenue's being massively cannibalized by that. And the big idea behind this was that they would create a service called Complain, and it would allow you to complain to a company, but you could bring Euroconsumers along with you. So imagine O2, heaven forbid, you had a bad experience with O2 and you felt you were being ripped off. What this would allow you to do in the UK, you could say, right, come on, Which Magazine, you come with me. Come with me to the offices of O2 and you can help me complain. And you've got someone with you who's powerful, trustworthy, credible, and will kind of help you and support you in your cause. So they thought, well, let's do this, and we'll create the service online whereby you can complain to a company, but it's the equivalent of being given some headed notepaper with the Euroconsumer's name on top of it, so they know you're serious. So that was the big idea, that was the proposition, and that was seen to be the solution to their problems. And so they asked us to create this service for them and to design it and to launch it. So a brilliant opportunity. So there was a big idea, and often these projects start with a big idea. It's like, great, I understand the problem, let's go ahead and solve it. But what was wonderful about this was that the project sponsor said, we're going to launch this in 6 months. Like, that was unheard of within this organization, to be able to create something that didn't exist in such a small period of time and launch it. Amazing. And I think there was a big competitor threat that was moving into the marketplace. So they had to get their skates on and get it out there. So the way that this was made was that we spent, at the very beginning of the project, we spent time with the lawyers who operated within the business, just understanding their business processes and how they did things. So tell us stories. How does this work? How do people complain? What's the legal process? Just kind of getting into the nitty-gritty. But then very quickly we could start to draw prototypes and sketches of the interface to bring this idea to life, because it didn't exist in any other format. And what that gave us was an artifact that we could put in front of people, like the general public in Brussels. I think we did this early work in, and said, explained a little bit about the service, but not too much, because we wanted people to try and ascertain from this asset what the hell this thing was. And so very quickly they could say, this is a rubbish idea. Why the hell would I ever use Euroconsumers? I don't trust Euroconsumers. There could have been massive questions around this whole proposition that, had we learned it was never going to work, we could have torn up some bits of paper and gone off and done something different. So amazing kind of experimentation. kind of mindset that allowed them to just to kind of go softly, try something out, iterate and improve. You know, the good news was the proposition seemed attractive to people, but there were fundamental flaws in which the way that we laid this thing out and the way we described things. So that allowed us to kind of iterate and improve and develop the service, which was launched within 6 months. It was astonishing. And we were able to kind of piggyback on existing technology like using email and email threads, whereby we didn't have to build anything that was brand new. So it was just kind of begging and borrowing from what they already had. So a really fascinating process that was a joy to work on because it was fast and we had the kind of permission to fail and experiment. And it was amazing that this thing kind of popped out and was there within 6 months, and it was massively successful. So, you know, it was empowering for us working on a project that we could see the output, because, you know, I'm sure you talk to any designer or developer about all the things that never went live. You know, everyone's got these stories of like, oh, that's the most amazing thing, such and such screwed it up, such and such, and you know, it's terrible. So it's lovely to see things go live, but a brilliant mindset to adopt to allow them to start to dip their toe in new markets and evolve their company. So a fantastic experience. So I promised I'd give you something to take away, so here's a thing. And it's just a short series of steps that I believe you can follow to help make your transformation programs a success. So first of all, come on, have a think about it. Work out what you're all about. Why are you doing what you're doing? What's your mission? What's your purpose? Your colleagues and your peers will appreciate it. You know, why not have a sense of where the hell you're headed? You know, how can you reach your destination if you don't know where it is? You know, how do these things work? So that's important, and that's very important for the people working on these projects to have a sense of what you're trying to achieve. So I think there's some kind of foundational work that needs to be done, but it doesn't need to be onerous. It doesn't need to be massively time-consuming. A big part of what we do is we help people to understand what their customers and what their users are actually doing in their lives. So typically, as I rather glibly, and apologies for that, talked about how people don't really care about your products and services, we help to bring that to life through mapping out the journeys or the experiences people go through to do certain things. So imagine you're planning a family holiday and you're thinking, well, it's a bit rank outside, isn't it? Miserable, can't wait till summer. Right, let's sort out a brilliant family holiday. So there's a trigger, you know, bad weather, whatever it might be. What these things do is allow you to kind of chart all the decisions that you make during that entire process. And it covers, and these are all based on customer research and user research. So we spend time with people understanding the stages they go through, their anxieties, their worries, their previous experiences, the questions they have in their mind at different points within that process, the things they do. I talk to a friend, I refer to someone who I know went to that destination, whatever it may be. Gather all these stories and pull these things together and then kind of map them across the continuum. So over here might be the triggers, and over here maybe returning from a holiday, whether it was good or bad, whatever it might be. And that gives you a really good understanding of what people are doing, regardless of how you enable them to do that on your website. It's a generic thing. It should be, you know, it should be kind of neutral from a brand point of view. But also across these things, you map what's happening within the business and where you want customers to go, whether it's an app or a website, whatever it may be. And you can map against what the user's trying to do, where you're succeeding or failing to kind of provide or service for that customer. And you can map on people's emotions, how they change over time. You can map on your business metrics, maybe it's NPS or whatever it may be. And it gives you an amazing kind of strategic planning tool to, in one place, be able to see what people are trying to do and how well you're servicing that thing. So that builds up that picture. Once you've built that, in terms of how you build those things up, you go and talk to people. Again, you know, not a unique idea, but it's remarkable how many people don't do this. And there's many ways you could do this. You can do this formally from doing user research. You can have a look on social media and see what people are talking about and what their anxieties and problems are. So you can pull together loads and loads of sources. This is an example where we were doing some research for Bristol City Council, actually, all around Metrobus. And we made a bus stop. It was remarkable. Someone created a prototype of one of the kiosks that's going to be in Bristol, where you can go. The idea is it's a ticketless system, so you can go to a kiosk, buy a ticket, or pay for a ticket, and then there's no tickets on the bus, which is supposed to speed the buses up, because loads of buses get delayed because people go on, you got changed for a £50 note, and the bus driver kicks off, and we've all seen it. You know, it's a big problem in Bristol. So we were given this prototype of a kiosk, of a bus stop. So there's us walking down to Long Ashton with a massive cardboard square. It's comedy, and we'd faked all the interfaces on bits of paper. And there was a big long queue of people trying to avoid us because I think they thought we were chuggers. And we got them to come along and try and use this fake kiosk. You know, where are you going? What sort of ticket do you need? How would you use this thing to buy your ticket? What are your worries? What are your concerns? And we fake the whole thing. So Anna here has a flip chart of all the interfaces, and she's like, right, what would you click next? And everyone plays along. It's brilliant. It's such good fun. So Chappie presses the button. Anna does her robot thing, flips over the page. And it's amazing because you get such rich feedback. So we learn loads of stuff. We learn loads of stuff from doing these sorts of activities through different varying kind of levels of complexity, if you like, on things that vary from a piece of paper to a fully fledged working service. So you go out and you learn stuff. And then once you've pulled these things together, you can start to use it to answer your questions. So where are the competition exceeding what we're doing? You know, what the hell are people trying to do at this stage of the journey? You know, where is this thing broken? Where should we be focusing our efforts in 2018? You know, where are we doing really well? You know, what's going on? So here's your planning tool. I believe from James there might be a secret build on this slide, so 5 minutes, thank you. So hopefully this thing might move. Let's see what happens. What this thing is trying to represent is that when you've got a picture of what's going on, you can create a roadmap of what the hell you should do about it. So if that previous map has identified all the problems, pull all the problems out of that thing, prioritize them. Typically we're involved with prioritizing things from a user experience point of view. So, you know, we'll play that card around a boardroom table and say, right, your customers are trying to do this. They absolutely hate the advertising that's been shown on this page. Or, you know, maybe it's like Paul's example, that dark pattern when you're trying to con people into kind of paying that extra donation. You know, you're really alienating people and they hate it. And of course, over the other side of the room is the head of advertising who'll be like, well, I love that because that bit allowed me to hit my target every financial year or whatever it may be. So there's horse trading that goes on. The developer in the room is kind of putting forward their point of view. Say, well, yeah, well, I know you're suggesting this feature, but, you know, because of our technology stack and this constraint and this problem, we can't do that until 2025. So everyone has to have a point of view, of course, but you pull all those things together and then you can all kind of decide what would be the most beneficial thing to do or series of things to do that will yield both a kind of user benefit and a business benefit. So you've got a plan, and at least it's based on something, you know, not just like, oh yeah, let's do that next year. You know, it feels like a more sensible way of doing things. So then you've got your master plan, for want of trying to make it too grand. You have a plan of activity, but then when you make things, you adopt this idea of there is no kind of big bang transformation. I mean, it used to terrify me when we were given these enormous redesign projects that would go on for, I've worked on loads of big redesign projects that have gone on for a long time. One of the most painful ones went on for at least 18 months. By the time we got to 18 months, all of the requirements had changed, so everything we'd worked on was just thrown away. And that's quite soul-destroying, and that's a hard thing to do. And from experiences like that, you just get a bit jaded, and you think, well, transformation doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. So why not break this thing down into smaller chunks? You know, make it a little bit more achievable and realistic, and adopt this idea of experimentation, and come up with these hypotheses. You know, let's be scientists. That's one part of my degree that's been useful, actually, this kind of scientific approach. You know, I believe that if we do this, this will happen. I'm not sure. I don't know. How do we know? How could you know? Let's try it, see what happens, and then we'll learn. And it's all right if it fails, who cares? We'll do something else. So that experimental mindset, I think, is critical for successful transformation. And that's echoed really in the way that you should then make these things. So with your experimental mindset, you can go and explore problems. So you may, within your research, identify some really weird behavior, like something's going on within our checkout process, and we don't know what it is. I think it might be this, he thinks it might be that. Let's go and find out. Let's go and kind of find out what's going on in the real world. So do some research, have something to base your decisions upon, but then, so to kind of, I'm sure you would have come across this idea of build the right thing and then build the thing right. So make sure you're spending time and effort on the right thing in the first instance, sounds sensible, and then go about making it in the right way. It's a classic kind of product management catchphrase. It's become a little bit. So once you've decided or once you've identified the thing to be working on, make that thing in the right way. You know, an alpha phase should be about developing a very, very kind of simple or early prototype that's a manifestation of your idea that you should take to the market and test. And then when you're confident that's the right thing to be making before you spend any more time and effort on doing that, you can then develop it into a beta or something. So it's this kind of incremental thing. You know, don't disappear into a cave for 18 months and then just go, da-da, because I've heard some recent instances of e-commerce clients doing that, and you think, my God, how terrified must you be? You know, you've built up everything. It's all about conversion. It's all about these metrics. And one day, it's the levers again. The lever has become an unexpected theme of this talk. Someone flicks that switch, and how's that going to feel for you? I mean, if any of you have been in that situation as kind of managers of e-commerce sites where you've had to flick the switch, and everyone surely is just doing this, going, ooh, and, you know, terrifying. Don't do that. Life's too short. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. Thank you, Chris. A minute left. Thank you very much. I'm done.